story at number 10 on our countdown. Global politics. Hamas releasing 3 Israeli hostages after 16 months of captivity in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners under a ceasefire agreement that was almost derailed. The hostages, American-Israeli Saji Dekel-Chen, Russian-Israeli Alexandria Trupovanov, and Argentinian-Israeli Ayer Horn. Trump took to Truth Social this morning about the release, and he wrote, in part, Hamas has just released 3 hostages from Gaza, including an American citizen. They seem to be in good shape. This differs from their statement last week that they would not release any hostages. Israel will now have to decide what they will do about the 12 o'clock today deadline imposed on the release of all hostages. The United States will back the decision they make. Joining us now to discuss, Blaine Holtz. He's a retired brigadier general and combat C-17 commander for the U.S. Air Force and a Newsmax contributor. Also with us, Colonel Tony Shaffer, retired U.S. Army colonel and the president of Project Sentinel. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Good to be with you.
Colonel Shaffer, let's start off with you first. What do you think about, they're supposed to be releasing all the hostages. Bibi, what do you think he'll do? They released 3 of them. But then again, they know that when Trump says something, he means it. And there will be all hell to pay if they don't release all of the hostages. What do you think will happen next?
All hell is being prepared as we speak. All options regarding return to combat operations is on the table. And President Trump, I think, appropriately deferred to Bibi Netanyahu to say, it's up to you guys. We're ready to go otherwise. I think what they're trying to do is what the objective was by accepting the Biden deal, Lydia. They want to get as many hostages, live hostages, out as possible before they return to combat operations. So at this point, I think the Israelis are going to allow the agreement to continue. With that said, I don't think phase 2 is going to last much longer. I think you're probably looking at combat operations as soon as next weekend if things continue as they're going right now.
In general, so the 3 men appear to be that were released today. They were in much better shape than the ones we saw last week. Also, they were given souvenirs. Newsmax even got a chance to speak with the American hostages' parents a short time ago. I think it was like last week. Let's take a listen to what they said.
Jonathan, your son was supposed to be freed during this phase, is supposed to be freed during this phase of the ceasefire, but we've been seeing them come out of order. Do you have any information, any hard information on when he is expected to be released?
No, we do not. As you know, he is scheduled to come out in this first phase of 33 hostages. We're dealing with a savage terrorist.
So what do you think about that? These hostages were now released in better health than the ones we saw last week, but still nonetheless, it's you see Hamas, they released these videos trying to brainwash the world. Right. There was even this propaganda video that they released where they showed one of the hostages fishing. He's eating a banana, like, oh, he was at Camp Hamas and not being held in captivity by brutal monsters.
And brutal monsters absolutely are not governed by any rules, any civilized rules. They took these hostages. That was illegal. They killed and raped so many others. They tortured hostages. I really think that the last 3 to come out before today maybe they went out of order because they were worried they were going to die. So they wanted to get them out. But I'm with Tony. I think this part of it is just get as many as you can. We know Hamas is going to fail on the deal at some point because they lie about everything, and we don't know how many hostages have passed away. So, I agree. The United States is ready. Hell can be unleashed at any time, but we're not going to do that without being in concert with our ally, Israel. And what a refreshing change that has been after watching what has happened over the last year to the Israeli-U.S. relationship.
Now let's move on to the other war, the one in Ukraine. Vice President J.D. Vance, he met with Ukrainian President Zelensky at the Munich Security Conference in Germany. This is President Trump obviously is looking to put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Zelensky saying he refuses to meet with the Russians and will only agree to see Putin after a common plan with Trump is negotiated. So now you also have Zelensky. He says he has Trump's cell phone number. Colonel Shaffer, Trump, once again, looks like he's going to be the peacemaker. Do you think he can get this done?
Yeah, Zelensky's irrelevant. Zelensky's been the one dragging his feet along with the Biden administration to reopening negotiations. Trump, what's going on, Lydia, is art of the deal meets Ronald Reagan. To win a battle, to win a poker game, you got to be at the table and you got to be facing the other guy. That's what Trump's going to do. That's why they're talking directly to the Russians. So at this point, I do see a level of discussion that's going to effectively end the war. Zelensky and the Ukrainians, the Europeans, they're all irrelevant at this point. It's down to Putin dealing with Donald Trump directly.
Meantime, you have the Wall Street Journal, General Holt, reporting that Vance told them, right, that if Putin doesn't agree to a peace deal that guarantees Kyiv's independence, the U.S. could hit Moscow where it hurts with sanctions, and that we could even see some troops on the ground in Moscow. But the vice president, he refuted this. He wrote on X that the Wall Street Journal completely twisted his words. He said that, you know, they're pushing for more sons, American sons and daughters in uniform to be unnecessarily deployed overseas. What do you think about this fake news, right? Because they were trying to scare everyone into thinking that President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance want to send American troops to Moscow. That's the last thing anybody wants.
You know, in one reckless, very dangerous news story that could have cost countless lives, if handled the wrong way by international players who react to a Wall Street Journal that they think is credible news. I can't believe how irresponsible this would be. What I would recommend, though, is that the Justice Department not just look at the story, but go find out where the story was inspired from, the origins, and how they got to that. Because, again, it's one thing to report or misleading headlines, putting spin on the ball. But if you outright lie in advance of the vice president's comments on the speech of his life, and it was an amazing speech, but it had nothing to do with what the Wall Street Journal was putting out. So I think you've got to get to that, to get to the end of that irresponsibility and prosecute it if necessary. Now, back to the vice president's speech, brave, bold, laid out the facts, knew he'd be in an environment where hardly anybody would be in agreement with him, because you're looking at the leaders of Europe that have largely concocted a war that has meant billions, weapons, but countless lives lost, no strategy to get to an end state, and no diplomacy, which now that football has been taken up by our president. And whether President Zelensky is going to be there or not, what President Trump is doing is off-ramping this war with the parties involved.
Now that we have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, we're seeing some vibrancy, some youth coming back to the military. Recruitment is going up, and there he is working out with troops ahead of his NATO meetings. Colonel Schaefer, I want you to take a listen to what he said regarding the war in Ukraine.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
So you just had there Pete Hegseth saying that. Then you have the Wall Street Journal trying to twist the words. What do you think the motive here, Colonel Schaefer? What was the motive of that article? I mean, like to your point, General Holt, lives could have been lost. People were put in danger with such a defamatory article.
Right.
One word, neocon. The neocon group, they run the Wall Street Journal. They are the ones invested in this war. They're the ones who were trying to keep it going. John Bolton, all the Democrats. Lydia, I'm going to be blunt. This has become a money-making enterprise. Where'd that $100 billion go that Zelensky can't find? Oh, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, maybe some other folks in the Democrat Party. This has been a huge boondoggle by all the folks that we know have been taking advantage of the American taxpayer. To Pete's words, Pete's job was to manage expectations. He did a brilliant job of it. He laid out the fact that, hey, if Europe wants to continue this, you can continue it, but you're going to do it without us. And I think it was a bold statement. President Trump fully said it. And to Blaine's point, Wall Street Journal didn't like it. That's why they literally put out that fake news story bending what Vice President Vance said. What Vice President Vance said and what Pete said were completely compatible. They were trying to create the perception of separation, and that does not exist.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it right there. Great conversation as always. General Holt, Colonel Schaefer, thank you both.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Coming up, Americans struggling to pay their bills, to stay employed and beat the inflation. It's definitely taking a toll, but President Trump has promised to fix it. Also talking about tariffs. We'll talk to an economic expert next to help calculate the reciprocal levies on other countries he ordered earlier this week. Now, why does this matter? Well, at least 175 countries globally have a VAT per the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, meaning it could impact the math on any reciprocal tariff for most nations around the world. And that impact could be seen most immediate in the European Union, which has standardized value-added taxes with an average rate of almost 22%. So we're going to break this all down. What does this mean? Will this increase inflation? Will it bring it down? Let's bring in our expert, Steve Moore. He's a senior economic advisor for President Trump. Steve, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
What does this all mean? That the tariffs, is this good news? Is it bad news? Explain to our viewers, what does this all mean?
Well, let's start with the proposition that free trade is a good thing, and that we do, it's fundamental to economics that if I trade with you and you trade with me, by definition, we're both better off. And that's true with trade between countries as well. What Donald Trump is pointing out is that a lot of these countries put much higher restraints on our ability to sell to them than they do to us. In fact, we are one of the lowest, if not the lowest tariff country in the world. And other countries have created a very unlevel playing field. And what Trump is saying is, first of all, he understands that the reality that every country in the world has to trade with the United States. We're the most important. We're by far the largest economy. We've got the biggest consumer market. So all the Europeans need to trade with the United States. Canada, Mexico have to trade with the United States. And the country that absolutely has to trade with the United States is China. Without their access to our markets, China would go into a Great Depression. So Trump is saying, look, you want access to our markets, you're going to have to lower your tariffs to the rate that we have because you're way up here and we're down here. And I think at the end of the now, look, it's a risky game because we don't want to see a trade war where both countries keep escalating up. But I think in this case, there's a good chance that what will happen is at the end of the day, we'll have freer and fairer trade. In other words, we'll have a more globally connected world, but we're going to have access to the markets that right now are shut off to us because of those high value-added taxes and tariffs that you just mentioned.
Right. If they're taxing us, whatever, 22%, we should do the same, reciprocal. Now, I'm looking at all of these articles online, and there's all this fear-mongering that this will only increase inflation, that goods will cost more because other countries are being taxed more. Is that the case?
Well, if you impose a tariff, all other things equal, that would raise price. So, for example, if you're importing toys from China and you buy those toys and you have a tariff on them, yeah, that's going to be passed on to the consumer. But, and this is a big BUT, everything else Trump is doing is very disinflationary. So he wants to drill, baby, drill. He wants to cut taxes or keep our taxes low. He wants to deregulate the economy. He wants fairer trade deals. All of these things put pressure down. In fact, don't forget, Trump said the other day in one of his speeches that he's willing to cut the business tax rate to 15% for things that are made in the United States. So in other words, if it's made in the United States, he wants to cut the tax rate. And if it's made in China, he wants to increase the tax rate. When you put those two things together, that's not inflationary.
Drill, baby, drill. As you mentioned, Joe Biden, first day in office, remember he signed that executive order shutting down that Keystone pipeline. He has strangled the fossil fuel industry. And instead, we were buying dirty oil from Venezuela. We were indirectly funding the war in Ukraine, buying all this oil from Russia. I mean, it's insane. And then a lot of mullah for the mullahs. Iran, we made them multi-billionaires when under President Trump's previous administration, he made them broke. Explain to our viewers why drill, baby, drill will help bring inflation down and how that actually caused the economic crisis that we have seen for the past 4 years.
Well, you mentioned the fact that you're quite right that the first act of Joe Biden's presidency was to cut off the Keystone XL pipeline. And you look back and you wonder, why would a president do something so hostile to his own country? I mean, we look back and I'm scratching my head to this day thinking it was such an unpatriotic thing to do. And yet I still think that a lot of these green groups that are pushing this climate change agenda are funded by Saudi Arabia, OPEC. In other words, who are the big winners by that? All the countries that have oil that don't want us to compete with them. Well, I guarantee you that we're going to be competing with them now because Trump is all into producing our oil, our gas, our coal. Don't forget about nuclear power, maybe geothermal power. Wherever we can get power, we're going to do it. And that's not just good for our economy and for lowering prices, as it surely is, but it relates to your previous discussion that you were having on our national security. I mean, if we don't have to depend on OPEC countries like Iran and Russia for our oil and gas, then that weakens them significantly in terms of their geopolitical power.
Before I let you go, Stephen, here in New York, Con Edison, major utility company, raising rates, double digits. We're talking about hundreds of dollars a month. Some people, we're talking about $1,000 utility bills. Now, it's not a coincidence that not too long ago, major nuclear power plant Indian Point was shut down. Also, Governor Hochul pushing this Green New agenda. What people don't understand is that when they push this Green New deal, scam, hoax, whatever you want to call it, it's not like these utility companies are going to absorb it. They're going to pass along those costs down to the consumer. Am I right? It's not just as easy as, this utility company is charging me more because they have a monopoly. It seems to be there's a domino effect, and behind it all are these stringent regulations and these green new regulations.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not the biggest fan of our utility companies either, because I think they are kind of monopolies.
Yes,
we got to figure that one out. But you're quite right that those costs all get passed on. And let's just keep this very simple. We have a $26 trillion industrial economy that makes everything from steel to AI to the internet and the cloud. And this uses enormous amounts of energy. And so why would you want to curtail your ability to make, to produce cheap energy? And anyone out there, you got the pictures on the windmills. If there's anybody out there who actually believes that those windmills are going to provide enough energy for a $26 trillion economy, I mean, I think it was incredibly nefarious what the left did. If you want to shut down the American economy, what better way to do it than to restrict our access to cheap and abundant energy? Shame on them. I guarantee you those windmills you're looking at are not going to provide the power for our mighty economy in the United States.
Right. We're going to have solar powered war tanks, right? I mean, it was just incredible. And then we have all of these EV stations throughout the nation, right? They allotted all of this money for billions of.
Wait a minute. We're supposed to, but remember they were going to build something like 50,000 of them, and it turned out they built 50 of them. Look, I'm not against green energy. We can use it as a fringe form of energy in some markets, but we still get 80% of our energy from old-fashioned fossil fuels. And this idea that we're going to go to zero is incredibly dangerous.
It really is. Stephen Moore, thank you so much for that great conversation there. Thank you. Coming up, the great confirmation bonanza. President Trump's cabinet picks his
election to refocus our intelligence community by empowering the great patriots who have chosen to serve our country in this way and focus on ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people.
There you have it. Our new intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, being sworn in. She's just one of President Trump's many victories this week. Welcome back to The Count. I'm Lydia Serrani. Now to story number 8 on our countdown. Cabinet confirmations. We just heard there from Gabbard. The Senate also confirming Doug Burgum as Interior Secretary. And, of course, RFK Jr. to lead Health and Human Services. Here to talk more about it, Anthony D'Esposito is a former Republican member of the House Homeland Security Committee for New York. Also with us, Jeffrey Lord, a columnist with the American Spectator. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Hello there, Lydia.
Hey. So Congressman RFK Jr., big confirmation. Many thought it wouldn't happen. Make America healthy again. He got a lot on his plate. He's got a lot to do. So here's what he says, how he wants to fix how Americans eat first and foremost. Take a listen to this.
These ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies.
What do you think about that, Congressman? I'm seeing a lot of moms that they're staunch Democrats, and they are thrilled about RFK Jr. finally addressing, an issue that's, I'm a mom, that we worry about all the time. What is in our food? What are we giving our kids?
Well, I think that that's a key to exactly what we're seeing in President Trump's second administration, is that you have people who probably historically didn't support Republicans, and they realize that President Trump is going to govern in his second administration with common sense. And that's exactly what RFK Jr. represents. He's talking about things that parents and PTA organizations and those who are picking their kids up from the bus stop talk about every day. And that's why we're seeing these cabinet secretaries that over the last couple of months, we've been told by the mainstream media, it's impossible. They're not getting through confirmation, and they're gliding through. Why? Because I think lawmakers in the Senate on both sides of the aisle realize that President Trump's picks are the picks that people want to see govern the future of this country.
Jeffrey, there are still key roles that still need to be filled, among them the FBI chief. The Senate Judiciary Committee voted 12-10 along party lines this week to proceed with Kash Patel's confirmation. Patel now heads to the full Senate, where the majority GOP has a 53-47 majority. How do you see this playing out? A lot of people, I think they're afraid of Kash Patel.
Well, I think he's going to make it. It is pretty unusual to reject a president's nominee for whatever position out there. Generally speaking, presidents get their way, and they're thought of as, give them the shot. This is who they want. Give them the shot to do what they want. So we will see. I think without question, one of the concerns about Kash Patel is that he's going to get in there and turn the FBI inside out and upside down, which I think it probably needs to do. I think it has become too highly politicized, weaponized, if you will, and they are very aware, the establishment, if you will, are very aware that Kash Patel is not going to put up with this kind of thing for 2 seconds. So I think that's why the opposition, but I think he's going to survive it and go on, and we will see.
And, Congressman, the lone GOP holdout for a lot of these confirmations has been Mitch McConnell. Here's what President Trump had to say about that.
Well, I feel sorry for Mitch. He'd let the Republican Party go to hell. If I didn't come along, the Republican Party wouldn't even exist right now. Mitch McConnell never really had it.
Mitch McConnell's also had some health issues. Congressman, what do you think about Trump's criticism there?
I think President Trump is absolutely right. And I think that Mitch McConnell, unfortunately, as a Republican, has become the poster child for term limits. And we need new leadership. We need young, vibrant leadership, people like Katie Britt in the Senate who are working and, most importantly, listening to the American people, because we won in 2024. President Trump was sent a mandate to govern this country and lead us as America First Republicans, not just because he was supported by conservatives and Republicans, but because independents and even moderate Democrats came across the aisle to the Republican side because they realized that the Republicans are now the party of common sense. And when you have somebody like Mitch McConnell who is going to vote no on cabinet secretaries just because I guess he's bitter or upset or maybe not even sure what he's voting for, I think that's a problem. And we need to be a unified front, not only in the House, but in the Senate as well. And having someone like Mitch McConnell, who was our former leader in the Senate, when he's going to turn around and vote against President Trump's picks, that's a problem. And I think
we have about 30 seconds left, Jeffrey. You see there's a common theme among all the people that Trump is picking. They're passionate, they're fierce, they're smart, and they're young. They're young, they're vibrant. It's a stark contrast from what we saw in the previous administration.
That's exactly right. Mitch McConnell has become the poster child for people who stay too long in Washington, D.C. You know, they should come, serve a couple terms, and go home. And that's not what he chose to do. He's not alone in that. And so, therefore, we're reaching a stage where he simply is unable to perform his job. And yet there he sits with a vote saying no. So that situation is going to be overridden. These people he opposed are going to be confirmed, but it is not a good thing to do, period.
Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, the list could go on and on that people just need to just retire already. Congressman D'Esposito, Jeffrey Lord, thank you both.
You bet.
Thank you, Leah.
Coming up, Attorney General Pam Bondi means business as she announces several lawsuits that are long overdue, one of them focusing right here on the Empire State, New York. We'll be right back. On the job for a little over a week, and she has not wasted any time getting down to business this week. Attorney General Bondi filing a civil lawsuit against New York Governor Kathy Hochul and State Attorney General Big Tish James for failing to enforce federal immigration laws. Let's bring in our panel to discuss this and more. Former federal prosecutor Doug Burns, and also with us, former California Republican Party Chair Tom Del Belcaro. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
Doug, your thoughts on Bondi's lawsuit against New York? I mean, of course, Hochul and James are calling it frivolous. What do you think? Does it have any merit?
It's a very sound case, actually, because New York passed a law called the Green Light Law. And it specifically says, and it's quite shocking, actually, that the Department of Motor Vehicles shall not share DMV information with anybody who makes a request in connection with federal immigration law. Next, if somebody makes such a request, DMV must notify the individual who is involved. And then there's a third provision, again, stressing that they are not to share DMV information. So legally, real quick, what this amounts to is a term a bit in the weeds called preemption, and that is that federal law preempts the field of immigration, and state laws like this, which interfere with federal law enforcement, are invalid. I think it's a very strong case, honestly.
Now, Attorney General Bonds has also sued the state of Illinois, but more specifically the city of Chicago, for also not enforcing immigration laws. Tom, what do you think? Should other sanctuary cities be concerned that they don't want to cooperate with federal law here? They don't want to go along with this mass deportation plan.
Well, that's certainly true. They don't want to get along. I'm a little less optimistic than my brother Doug here, because this comes down to a question of the 10th Amendment and what can the U.S. government require states to do. You know, many years ago, when they wanted to raise the age of drinking to 21, the federal government knew they couldn't tell a state to do that. So they said, OK, we're not going to give you money unless you do. And unfortunately, the immigration laws don't explicitly say you got to give us this information or explicitly say that you have to turn over these people to us. So the fight here that will make it to the Supreme Court is, as written, can you require the states to do this? And is what, in practice, Illinois and New York doing, are they violating this federal law? I think it's going to be very interesting, and that's going to be a 5-4 case. But politically, the issue still is with Trump. Because if it even comes down that you can't do this, the Democrats lose because they're protecting criminals just as they are protecting fraud when it comes to U.S. aid, and that's a bad place to be.
Now, speaking of big blue cities, let's talk about New York City. Mayor Eric Adams specifically. The Department of Justice, officially as of last night, dropped the corruption case against him, instructed, of course, President Trump, because it's politically persecuted, right? Mayor Adams was called the Biden of Brooklyn. He was a darling of the Democrats until he became a very vocal critic of Biden's border crisis, his open border policies. And now, Doug and Tom, you both know, there are calls. Hochul is actually looking into whether or not she can remove him from office. Tish James says she's looking into it as well. I'm looking at it right here. State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins also calling for him to step down. Hakeem Jeffries even talking about it. The drama is never ending, and it's all because they think he is compromised because Trump's DOJ dropped the charges. What do you think about this? If this is this political persecution at its finest once again, Doug?
Well, they created a narrative, as they always do. And, there's some viability to the notion that, look, Mayor Adams sort of adjusted his approach because he had this criminal case hanging over his head. That's entirely fair. But they went a little too far, and they turned around and said that his lawyer, very well-respected lawyer, Mr. Spiro, turned around and told DOJ in a meeting, if you drop the case, then my client, the mayor of New York City, will cooperate with, the immigration enforcement. The lawyer denies up and down that ever took place, et cetera. Look, the Department of Justice is a hierarchical organization, and when the Deputy Attorney General tells a U.S. Attorney's Office to drop a case, they drop the case, because all 94 U.S. attorneys report directly to the DAG, the Deputy Attorney General. So again, the woman resigned. She was acting U.S. Attorney. So they jump right in with the drama of that. There's no drama. She would have been gone in 4 weeks anyway, by the way. People should know that because there's a turnover in administration. So again, the truth is sort of in the middle. But the fact is, it was kind of an underwhelming case. And I think it had heavy political overtones because he criticized Biden.
Right. And then, Tom, they didn't talk about removing him from office and how serious disturbing these charges were until Trump's DOJ dropped the charges. What do you think? Can Hochul do something like this? Is it possible? And then they're harping on the fact that the case was dismissed without prejudice, meaning that they could revive it again. But isn't that common practice when you dismiss a case like that?
Well, I can tell you this. What Trump did the right thing. He said, look, I'm not going to stand by while there is politically motivated cases. So he dismissed it and created this bright line saying no more politically motivated. If the facts merit this, it can be brought back. But yes, Kathy Hochul really going after a Democrat, let's be clear. He did the criticism, and then weeks later, the investigation was brought in. But I like the position of President Trump. I'm not going to stand by and allow politics to determine who gets charged. Now it's up to the Democrats to do what? Remove their own? Again, politically, they're on the wrong side of this. And Hochul, whose career, much like Gavin Newsom's, is gone after this, if she wants to take the position that she has to go over a Democrat mayor of New York, okay, good, because that's another cement block around her legs.
Right. Last I checked, in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. And Lady Justice has a blindfold on for a reason. That's how I feel. I mean, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican. If you're found guilty, then removed. And if you're going to remove the guy, remove him because he did a...
Trump demands radical left Reuters return $9 million to U.S. government that he gave them after baseless Elon Musk claim. President Donald Trump unleashed on radical left Reuters over a 2018 Pentagon contract to study large-scale social deception, a contract awarded during his own administration, and demanded the news agency give back the money now. The brief but furious outburst was pushed out early on Thursday as the president cited the revelation as a finding of his newly minted Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Trump posted on Truth Social. DOGE. Looks like radical left Reuters was paid $9 million by the Department of Defense to study large-scale social deception. Give back the money, now. Indeed, DOGE's agency head Elon Musk boosted a post on X claiming the contract showed the news agency received millions for social engineering. Musk's implication was more controversial, that Reuters, a respected global news agency, was somehow running disinformation campaigns on behalf of the Pentagon. That, however, appears to be a misreading or deliberate misrepresentation of a publicly available government document. The contract, first flagged by mega influencer Ian Miles Chong, surfaced after Musk, apparently disgruntled by a Reuters article arguing DOGE cuts were politically motivated, asked followers to find out how much federal money the organization had received. The idea, predictably, fueled a fresh round of conspiracy theorizing that once again made its way right to the Oval Office. A quick fact-check reveals, however, something else. The contract in question, issued in 2018 during the first Trump administration, was actually awarded to Thomson Reuters Special Services for Cybersecurity Research. Issued by the Department of Defense through the Air Force Research Laboratory and DARPA, the contract is described on the government's USA spending website as being in relation to active social engineering defense, ASED, large-scale social deception, LSD. The ASED program aims to create scalable systems capable of detecting, analyzing, and mitigating threats to bolster cybersecurity. While Musk pushed the idea that Reuters had been paid to carry out large-scale social deception, Trump made it closer to the truth in saying that the contract was to study it. What the president missed in his attack on the news agency was that the company awarded the contract was Thomson Reuters Special Services, which operates separately from Reuters News and specializes in fraud detection and risk management, areas directly relevant to countering cyber threats. Organizations like LexisNexis, Bloomberg, and Wolters Kluwer operate in similar spaces, offering fraud prevention and compliance tools. After Musk and Trump's intervention, however, a contract awarded to a risk analytics firm to develop cybersecurity defenses has now been twisted into an elaborately misleading narrative about Reuters' alleged role in state-sponsored media manipulation. A narrative that just happens to lend itself well to Trump's media vendetta and Musk's bid to cut costs.